Porter visited Netanyahu. For real. And she actually had positive things to say about Netanyahu. Now, we're going to talk about the issues with Netanyahu and what's happening to certain groups of people in Israel because of his policies and his beliefs. But we're going to talk about this visit first, because this actually did happen. It says Representative Katie Porter pushed for Dem delegation to meet with Netanyahu and says she was extremely impressed. Let's get into it. I can't even exaggerate this if I wanted to. Let's all remember that Katie Porter did announce that she is running for Dianne Feinstein's seat as well for the Senate. So just keep that in mind. Here we go. Last month, 15 Democratic House members traveled to Israel as part of a delegation sponsored by the liberal Zionist group J Street. According to a new Jewish Insider interview with Representative Katie Porter, the Congresswoman pushed the delegation to meet with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and was extremely impressed with his willingness to grapple with us on some of the toughest issues that Israel's facing. Notice how they framed this. Notice how Katie framed this. What about the tough issues that the Palestinians are facing? No, a lot of people, for whatever reason, praise Katie Porter. They paint her as a progressive. Should people continue to call Katie Porter progressive? Let's go into this. Let's go on. In January, Porter launched a Senate campaign to succeed Senator Dianne Feinstein in 2024. Fellow California Representatives Adam Schiff and Barbara Lee are also running for the seat. Porter told J.I. Matthew Castle that Netanyahu was extremely generous, both with his time and with his thoughts, and that the J Street group was really able to have an interactive dialogue with him. Now, I want to point something out right here about J Street Group. Now, Katie Porter does receive donations from J Street. It's tricky how they do it on Open Secrets if you're not really paying attention, because they have one column that says individuals and one column that says PACs. So Katie Porter takes individual dollars from J Street. That's people who work at J Street. But she doesn't take PAC money from them. And this is what some of these progressive politicians have been doing. They're taking money from some of these groups that I would say are corporate, but they're not taking it as PAC money. They're taking it as individual money. So they're still able to stand up and say, I'm not taking any PAC money. But there's still interest attached to this. Obviously, if you're getting donations from people that work at J Street Group, obviously your opinions and your politics is not going to go in the favor of the Palestinians there. So let's go on. I was extremely impressed with his willingness to kind of grapple with us at some of the toughest issues that Israel's facing. Everything from judicial reform, an issue that we're having questions and discussions about right now within the Democratic Party here in the U.S., to issues about the West Bank and about settlements. We emphasized, and I think Netanyahu emphasized back, that there's a long-term project here, which is to have a vibrant, secure, Jewish democratic state of Israel. And that in order to do that, there needs to be opportunities for the Palestinian people to have their own elected government and governance and land. Long story short, that's two-state solution. Now, we interviewed the Palestinian Network on RBN, and they made it very clear to us that the two-state solution is not a good option. We have to think about who has the power. So if you have a two-state solution, you have the Palestinians and you have the Israeli people. You can already see, and we've shown the maps on this, the Palestinian people have been slowly, but over the decades being pushed out. So there's less, right? The Palestinians are in the minority here. So if you have a two-state solution and you have these two governments, it's still an issue because the Israeli government is the majority. So the Palestinian people are still going to be at a disadvantage. This is the point I think more people need to mention, that more people need to bring up. That's not just an easy option. And again, I was educated about that from the Palestinian Network. Let's go on. But we shouldn't let, oh, here we go right here. How we get there is unclear right now. Of course it is. But we shouldn't let the impediments to that progress prompt us to give up on the goal, given its incredible importance to Israel and to the region and to the United States. Notice how she framed this, the incredible importance to Israel, not to the Palestinians, to Israel, the region, and the United States. They're very careful with their rhetoric here. Again, you have to look at who's funding her. Porter has emerged as a progressive favorite in recent years as a result of her fierce advocacy for consumer protection and forthright questioning of right-wing officials during congressional hearings. She's not known for her foreign policy positions and admits to Castle that she is new to the issue. So she admits she's new to the issue of foreign policy, but here she is bragging to people, telling them that she was impressed with Netanyahu. Is she aware of his foreign policy decisions? Let's go on. But she certainly doesn't typically vote with the relatively small group of House members who champion the rights of Palestinians. You see this right here? You see that? She's not a co-sponsor of Representative Betty McCollum's bill aimed at impeding Israel's detention of Palestinian children. She voted in favor for additional $1 billion in the Iron Dome funding in 2021 and backed a 2019 House resolution condemning the nonviolent BDS movement. Notice how they framed this, and I'm glad they framed it that way. Yes, it is a nonviolent movement. She is against it. She's against BDS. She's another one. So I would say when we talk about these progressives, so to speak, I would say people like Katie Porter, Richie Torres, and Hakeem Jeffries can all be put into the same group. They're the ones that they've been able to fool people into thinking that they're progressive because they may be good on a couple of domestic issues, but not all the way there yet. They may not take as much PAC money. She still does take PAC money, by the way. You can look it up on Open Secret. She does take some PAC money, but the majority of what she takes for donations is not. So they're the ones, they're the tricky progressives, so to speak, because they're the ones that have been able to fool people into thinking that they're actually progressive when they're not, especially when it comes to foreign policy. Hakeem Jeffries doesn't even agree with Medicare for all, but they call him progressive. Let's go on. She's also praised the tightening of sanctions on Iran, on Iran, sanctions on Iran. You see this? Okay, this is who Katie Porter is. Porter also told Castle that she has reached out to local AIPAC officials for Middle East analysis and read Noah Tishby's 2021 book, Israel, A Simple Guide to the Most Misunderstood Country on Earth. AIPAC is the same group that threw in big money to stop Nina Turner. It's the same organization that Bakari Sellers actually championed to create a pact with to prevent Rashida Tlaib from winning re-election. This is who she's aligning herself with. Tishby, an Israeli actress and special envoy for combating anti-Semitism and the delegitimization of Israel, is an outspoken opponent of the BDS movement and advocate for the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance controversial working definition of anti-Semitism. She regularly equates Judaism with Zionism and claims that anti-Zionism is inspiring attacks on the Jewish people. Let's talk about something here for just a second. It's interesting how they're willing to point that part out. Katie Porter is willing to sit down and read a book to understand what's happening to the Israeli people? Is Katie Porter willing to sit down and read a book to understand what's happening to the Palestinian people? It's really interesting to me the number of people who jump on board for I am against BDS, but she just told you so herself. She's not good on foreign policy. Has she sat down and read a book about that? Has she spoken to someone like Rashida Tlaib, who is Palestinian and does advocate for the Palestinian people? We got some issues with Rashida too, because she also hypocritical. But has she had that conversation with one of her own members in her own party? Let's go on. We go down to this part here. Zionism is a movement for Jewish liberation and self-determination in a Jewish, not exclusively Jewish state, Tishby told the crowd at a pro-Israel rally in 2021. It's about the Jews, their right of Jewish people to live as free people after millennia of persecution in our ancestral land. When ignorant crowds and some supermodels on Instagram hatefully, irresponsibly spread these lies about Zionism, when they chant from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, when they engage in the modern day libel of blaming Israel as a genocidal state, they shouldn't be surprised when that demonization results in Jews being attacked on the streets of this beloved country. Let's talk about the attacks for a second. Based on the videos that I've seen, and based on the numbers, and based on the maps throughout the decades, the majority of people that have been being attacked there are the Palestinian people. And we can't just talk about the attacks on the Palestinians without talking about the attacks on the Ethiopians who are also in Israel. A lot of times people mention this. They talk about the Palestinians and the Israelis, but a lot of them are not mentioning that there are also Ethiopian Jews who live in Israel as well. And they are also being attacked, racially attacked. Mint Press News has done a really good job of covering this, by the way. They have the video footage. So the Israeli government doesn't want them there either. Let's go on. In addition to J Street, Porter's congressional campaigns have been backed by Democratic Majority for Israel, a lobbying group created for the expressed purpose of stomping out the growing concern for Palestinians within the Democratic Party. In 2018, Twitter post DMFI board member Archie Goatsman declared that Gaza was full of monsters and that it was time to burn the whole place. So she went there and she met with Netanyahu. And some of you may wonder, well, what's wrong with Netanyahu? Now, I'm going to show you an article here about some of his problematic takes. And it's not just me calling this out. There are also other politicians in DC that have called out the growing concern for his far right principles in Israel. Now, The Guardian had a take on this. This is coming from The Guardian. Netanyahu is Israel's own worst enemy. Why won't Western allies confront him? This is coming from Simon Tisdall. Now, this article was written this year, January 2023. And there's Netanyahu. Samir Aslan did what any father would do when Israeli soldiers broke into his home at a refugee camp last week to arrest his son. He rushed to protect him. The 41-year-old Palestinian was shot and killed. His death received scant notice, so frequent are such incidents. A reported 224 Palestinians were killed last year in the occupied West Bank, which suffered almost daily army raids. 2023 is shaping up to be even worse. See, these are the type of things that Katie Porter doesn't want to talk about this. This is Netanyahu's government. Let's go on. The main reason is a new ultra-nationalist, hard-right religious coalition government in Jerusalem that includes racist, anti-Arab ministers determined to annex all the Palestinian territories. You know what's interesting to me is that some of the Democrats that we have in DC, they have no problem calling out hard right nationalists in the United States. They have no problem calling out these people in the Republican Party. But then those same people, like Katie Porter and Hakeem Jeffries, they don't do the same in reference to Netanyahu's government. Hakeem Jeffrey praises the state of Israel. He said it's New York's sixth borough. Katie Porter was just there meeting with Netanyahu. And I want more people to notice this. If it's really so much about this far right extreme that people are afraid of, or the Democratic Party is afraid of, why are they willing to call it out in this country, but they won't call it out in the state of Israel? Probably because there's some donations thrown that way. Let's go on. Yet the response to this alarming, destabilizing development from Israel's Western allies has been strangely muted. A few have issued veiled warnings. None has imposed the sort of sanctions or boycotts leveled in the past on political extremists in other countries. The coalition's objectable plan raised a broader, uncomfortable question for the U.S. and Europe, reaching beyond the two familiar abuses of impunity and military occupation. In short, can Israel still be considered a reliable, law-abiding ally that shares a set of common values and standards with Western democracies? Maybe this is why governments are keeping stum. In critical respects, Israel's under Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's self-perpetuating leadership is a liability. You see this? Is a liability. Again, this is the Guardian calling this out, not the Democrat politicians for the most part in DC. The Guardian is a liberal outlet. Make it make sense. It obstructs a two-state solution to the Palestinian conflict and scorns the UN and international law. It refuses to back sanctions over Russia and Ukraine. It rubbishes the 2015 Iran nuclear deal while threatening war. It sells spyware and arms to authoritarian regimes that abuse human rights. It sells spyware and arms to authoritarian regimes that abuse human rights. So does the U.S. government. Maybe that's the connection. Didn't the U.S. government sell arms to Saudi Arabia? Didn't Saudi Arabia use those arms against people in Yemen? Guardian's not going to say that part, though. Worse still, perhaps, Netanyahu's band of bigots is actively undermining Israel's democratic institutions and civil rights, such as peaceful protests and LGBTQ rights. Again, this is another issue. And as much as Democrats like Kamala Harris and Joe Biden and all of them want to champion and fight for LGBTQ rights in this country, as much as they like to get on TV and say that we have to protect these marginalized groups in this country from the far right, they seem to have no problem with those same issues happening in the state of Israel, and they have no problem backing their leader. This is why I continue to say it's not really about left versus right. It's about money. It's about who the donors are. And so a lot of these politicians, they're getting money from groups like AIPAC. They're getting money from groups like J Street. That is why they go along with this. Let's go on. Many Israelis, both Jews and Arabs, passionately oppose the government. Senior politicians warn of civil war. Diplomats and generals are mutinying. But reckless, opportunistic Netanyahu doesn't care. Conventional imperatives for treating Israel different from other countries read like this. Israel is the Middle East's only genuine democracy. It must be supported. It is surrounded by hostile regimes seeking its destruction. It must be defended. Remembering the Holocaust, Europe and America owe the Jewish people an eternal debt and must be honored. America also owes African Americans who are descendants of slavery an eternal debt, but they don't want to honor that one. Get comfortable. Get comfortable. We're going all in tonight. Grab popcorn, tea, whatever you need. We're going all in. No holding back. You see how this works? It must be honored for another group of people, for another country. But when it comes to African American descendants of slavery and you want to bring up reparations, can't honor that though. And that's a debt that's owed. Let's go on. This ingrained thinking informs but does not excuse reluctance to confront the far-right zealots. Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich, leader of the religious Zionist party who advocates annexation of the entire occupied West Bank, is now in charge of settlement construction. One of his first acts was to seize 40 million in Palestinian Authority funds. It goes on. Itamar Ben-Gvir, co-leader of Jewish Power Party, who was previously convicted for inciting racism, is the new national security minister. He began by ordering a police crackdown on Israeli anti-government protests, banning Palestinian flags, and paying a deliberately provocative visit to Jerusalem's most sensitive holy site. Netanyahu's coalition is moving quickly to tame the judiciary, the very same justice system that is prosecuting him for alleged corruption. Meanwhile, criticism grows risky. Fogel of Jewish Power last week accused opposition leaders Lapid and Gantz of treason against the homeland. Little wonder President Isaac Herzog felt the need to call for calm. U.S. President Joe Biden, a stalwart Israel ally, views upholding democratic values as the defining global struggle of the age. Netanyahu's close association with democracy, destroying Donald Trump, enthusiastic endorsements of Brazil's wonderful coup plotter, Bolsonaro, and matey dealings with Russia's Vladimir Putin and Hungary's Orban must have Biden puzzling whose side the sixth-term prime minister is really on. Progressive American Jewish leaders have similar concerns. And there it is there that Joe Biden has no problem supporting someone like Netanyahu, who has these beliefs, who has these ideals, and holds them so much to be true. He has no problem supporting that type of right-wing behavior in Israel and has no problem backing the state of Israel. But he has a problem with it when it happens here in the Republican Party. And what I want to say to you is this: all of these people are bought and paid for. And this is why I continue to tell you, it doesn't matter who runs, because if they're running in this system and where both of these parties are corporately owned, that is who the politicians are going to serve. They're not going to serve the American people. So I want to put this ask out there. For the love of God, can people please stop calling Katie Porter progressive?